Do you have memories of taking field trips in school? Or maybe you have some field trips that made a turn for the worse? Either way, we all know that there are a ton of ways that school field trips can go wrong. We have scoured the internet for stories of the top 10 school field trips that have gone wrong. These stories range from tragic to hilarious. If you're ready for some cringe-worthy and horrifying field trip stories, then keep on watching.
Interact with us. Subscribe and hit the notification button to be notified when we upload more content. Don't forget to leave a like and comment below. Also, feel free to suggest any type of videos you would like to see on this channel. Thanks!
Scary Dairy Farm. BuzzFeed community member Claire H. once took a field trip to a dairy farm. Sounds like a good idea, right? Kids love animals. The class got to help milk cows and feed calves. For the rest of the day, students were able to spend their time hanging out with the cows, petting and admiring them, and they had lots of fun. Then, they went on to the next spot on their trip, which was unfortunately a slaughterhouse. The children had to watch cows be delivered and killed, and they even visited a room where the dead animals' bones were cut out. This trip to the slaughterhouse ended in children crying, vomiting, and more than one of them fainting from the horrific imagery, especially after spending the whole day bonding with cows. After visiting the slaughterhouse, the children enjoyed a lunch, which sadly included beef patties. Needless to say, this day that was meant to teach children all about the food industry was not very well planned. An extra disturbing trip to the morgue. When the Forensic Science Club from a high school in Staten Island, New York, took a field trip to the morgue, they were prepared to encounter the body parts of dead people. However, they were not prepared to encounter the body parts of a dead person that they knew. In a cabinet in the medical examiner's lab, the students noticed a brain in a jar that was labeled as belonging to Jesse Shipley, a 17-year-old student that had died in a car crash 2 months earlier. Even though Shipley's family had agreed to an autopsy, they were shocked by this news because they thought his cause of death was obvious and they were under the impression that their son had been buried with all of his organs. Shipley's parents sued the state for emotional distress, although it was within the medical examiner's discretion to remove the body parts for further observation. Car crashes are not always as clear-cut as they seem. The cause of death could be much more complex than just simple blunt force and may require a more extensive examination. The dump truck accident. On May 17, 2018, a group of Eastbrook Middle School students and their teachers were headed out on a field trip to Waterloo Village. Waterloo Village is a restored historic site in Stanhope, New Jersey that features a working meal complex, general store, blacksmith shop, and historic houses. On the way there, tragedy struck when the bus collided with a dump truck on the highway, running the bus into the guardrail, flipping it, and leaving it in ruins. The passengers had to climb out of the windows and emergency exits on the roof of the bus. Sadly, one teacher and one student passed away in the accident. All 45 passengers, 38 which were students, were taken to a nearby hospital. Several were seriously injured and required surgery. What a terrible way to end a trip early. Washington's Most Wanted Chaperone. Having to return to school after a field trip is the worst. But it gets a lot more interesting when your return to school involves a fugitive running from the law. This was a reality for one school in the Seattle area when a parent recognized one of their fellow field trip chaperones from his recent appearance on Washington's Most Wanted, a regional crime show similar to America's Most Wanted. Donald Vassar was a so-called high-violent offender with more than 20 previous arrests. When the group returned to Lowell Elementary School, it was on lockdown and police officers were waiting for the fugitive. He was able to evade the officers after a brief scuffle. However, justice prevailed when Vassar turned himself in later in the day. The school was perplexed as to how the man was able to become a chaperone in the first place because they were all given background checks. But in the end, the field trip did help lead to Vassar's arrest. The Disney World prank. Imagine how exciting it would be to find out that your class was taking a field trip to Disney World. This was the case for 8th graders at Roseland Public School in Ontario, Canada. The teachers gave out permission slips and travel brochures for students to bring home to their parents. Finally, all the classes were gathered together for a presentation explaining the logistics of their Disney World trip, including how the kids would be roomed together. At the end of the presentation, the teachers revealed that they weren't actually going to Disney World, but they were actually taking a field trip to a local bowling alley. What a rude prank to pull on a class of 13-year-olds. The students and their parents were very upset, especially because one teacher had gone so far as to film the students' reaction. Reportedly, only one teacher took the blame and apologized for the prank. However, none of the teachers at Roseland Public School that participated in this deceitful prank faced any consequences from the school. Still, what a way to find out about your bowling alley field trip. A bowling alley boo-boo. Before Lindsay Polston was a teacher, she was a camp counselor at a day camp for elementary-aged children. On a blog for teachers, she shared a story of a particularly interesting experience on a camp field trip to a bowling alley. There were plenty of counselors present with first aid kits just in case, but that was no help when a first grader stuck his hand in the bowling alley ball return and it got stuck. The machine started smoking and there was a smell of burning rubber before an employee came over to turn off the machine and free the camper's hand. An ambulance was called by the bowling alley staff just in case, although the kid ended up being just fine and not needing to go to the hospital. The kids' parents were notified of the incident that occurred and arrived at the same time as the paramedics. However, they said they weren't surprised by what happened and it sounded like something their kid would do. Some kids are seriously just crazy. Not safe for school museum. According to an educator's blog, one particular school teacher had been taking groups of her 7th grade students to a local museum for several years. The museum had some pretty awesome exhibits where students got to learn about ancient history, view an actual mummy, and go on a simulated archaeological dig. The rest of the time, students were free to explore the various traveling exhibits of the museum, which were different each year. One year, right after she arrived with her group of 60 students and chaperones, the museum's manager rushed over to let her know about a new exhibit featuring a bold new artist. When she saw the exhibit, it was full of portraits of nude adults, sculptures featuring adult toys, and display of antique adult toys and drug paraphernalia. Of course, telling a group of 12-year-olds that an exhibit is forbidden only makes them more curious, so she had to spend the entire field trip guarding the entrance to the exhibit, making sure no students entered. A bus set ablaze. On March 18, 2019, a group of 40 kids from Windsor Elementary School, along with their teachers and chaperones, were ready for a field trip but had no idea about the horrible accident they were about to encounter. The school group was headed to Camp Discovery, a park in Blythewood, South Carolina that specializes in science and environmental education. On the way there, the bus driver pulled over and evacuated everyone when they noticed smoke coming from the bus. Minutes later, the bus burst into flames. Luckily, no one was hurt. Disturbing videos of the incident show the entire front of the bus totally engulfed in flames. A replacement bus was driven out to the stranded group of students and teachers, and they were even able to complete their trip and enjoy some nature at Camp Discovery. Apparently, the Richland School District 2 has had buses with fire issues in the past, but this was a different bus as the other buses had been taken out of rotation. The school district said this bus likely had issues because it is an older model. Talk about a crazy travel delay. Lost at the rodeo. In March 2020, a group of kids from Thompson Elementary School in Houston attended the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo on a school trip. A 3-year-old preschooler named Carter Williams was separated from his group at the rodeo. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is a massive event with thousands of visitors every day. A man noticed the lost 3-year-old in the crowd and was able to return him to another group from Thompson Elementary. At this point, Carter's group had already left on the bus. Luckily, Carter was reunited with another group from his school and was able to return to school with that group. The 3-year-old's mother was extremely distressed when she found out her child had been lost. Surprisingly, she did not find out that her child had been lost until 3 days after the incident. The incident was not reported because everything ended up okay. To the school, there was no harm, no foul, but Carter's mom did not think the same. The school district did not state if the teachers involved would be disciplined, but the child's mother said that she did not feel safe sending her son back to school. Monkey business. In a thread asking for field trip horror stories, a teacher on Reddit recalled one field trip to the zoo. One particular student, who was known for being poorly behaved, threw a stick into the gorilla enclosure with force. The provoked gorilla hurled the stick right back. hard. The returned stick hit the boy right in the face and immediately broke into pieces, causing the boy to fall straight down. The commotion started to rile up the rest of the gorillas in the enclosure, and soon they drew the attention of the nearby orangutans. The various primates began angrily hurling feces at the students, who all scattered, leaving the zoo staff to try and calm the enraged primates. Within 30 minutes, the school group had been banned from the zoo. The boy who was initially hit by the stick thrown by the gorilla ended up having to go to the hospital to get stitches in his chin. You could say that his monkeying around got him and his school in big trouble. Can you believe these stories of field trips gone wrong? Talk about having a bad trip. From something as serious as a life-threatening bus crash to something as silly as monkeys flinging poop at the zoo, it is seriously amazing how many ways a field trip can be ruined. Do you have any terrible field trip stories of your own? Which of these top 10 field trips that went wrong seem the worst to you? Join the conversation and share your thoughts in the comments below.